Hello, everyone. This is the product design sync for the editor group, and it is June 23rd. So I'll jump right in. I'm going to move my stuff around real quick and talk about these two things first on the agenda. So I wanted to summarize some of the feedback that I've been fielding in our feedback issues for our big 14.0 releases. I'm very excited that it's all out there, and I came back to generally positive feedback and excitement, which was great to come back from some vacation time and see that. The content editor issue is not as probably as expected. It doesn't hit as many people, but it's not as active. The people that are in there are universally asking for image insertion and table editing, which we knew was going to be our next effort. So that's excellent validation that we're working on the right things in 14.1. Overall, people are into the idea of the content editor and kind of see where we're headed, and it's very validating, the feedback in that issue. So I'm excited by that. Hopefully, I think, and I'll get to this later on my last agenda point, but I think it also has me feeling like we might want to move sooner than later to change the editing experience over into a block editor and more of a full page editing like your vision document. But we'll try and figure out where that fits in and when to do it, in what order. Don't need to do that in a synchronous meeting. And then in the top left nav, there's very little feedback on the left nav. In general, it seems pretty widely accepted. There was one bit of feedback that I've seen that echoes what we've heard in the internal feedback issue, which is that tooltip pattern for items that don't have submenus can be a little confusing about where the click action is. And generally, we knew there were going to be some people that are resistant to change and have very valid feedback to the introduction of a new click. It seems fairly universal to me that people who have large screens don't respond as well to this change because they see that there's room. I'm still working on my response to the last bit of feedback, but generally I think making it clear that this is an iterative step towards a larger change and adding more functionality in this menu while like using that space for other things is going to be a change for the better in general. So nobody's, threatening to leave GitLab over it, so I'm happy there. Yes, and so Amy, I don't know if you want to voice over your comment there.
Yeah, I was so focused on the top nav changes that the left nav changes, I knew they were coming and I still was caught by surprise. And I realized I actually really like this. So cool.
Yeah. I saw the work in progress and it really came together towards the end, and those last MRs merged to polish everything up. It is delightful in my opinion. So for the record,
polished
I love
the
word. Changes. Yeah, it's very polished. It's very good. So I'm super happy. It feels snappy. Everything is the way we wanted it to be. So I'm super happy with the work for 14.0. Yeah, anything you want to add to the feedback topic?
Yeah, Michael? I just wanted to say that I think this was a really good example of using feature flags early. So because we had the feature flag out a lot earlier, we got a lot of internal feedback so that Dennis and Paul can make those polished changes prior to unleashing it to the wider audience. So yeah, really good with that, because it'd be a total different 14.0 if we didn't release with the feature flag. So happy with that. And yeah, more polished to come, because I've been looking at some of the other concerns from the feedback. So for me, I'm almost happy, but we'll get there for me. Like you know, when you can see the imperfections with this and that. But yeah, I think it was a great team effort. Like, yeah, really good execution of the way the teams were like kind of grouped up with Fred and Dennis working on the sidebar, and like Chad and Paul and the top nav, and how things just came together. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Really, really
agree.
impressed
I
by the
agree.
team.
It's been a great team effort, and to watch them come together and work on these separate areas, but share learnings as we went along was really great. I think the next point. Oh, so yeah, Amy, I don't know if you want to share. You don't. Okay. Well, yes, the feature flag approach helped a lot. I would say for future planning, if anybody's watching this and attempting to ship two massive redesigns of our global navigation simultaneously in a major release, like bake in one more milestone where the feature flag is on internally or something like that, or like in a control group where we can continue polishing. You know, there's always something you can do with more time. It can always use more polish. I feel good about what we shipped in production. But I feel like we knew some of this feedback was coming, and we could have had another milestone to address it before releasing. Yeah, hindsight though. Speaking of hindsight, for future reference, I was struck by this is a shortcoming on my side for not communicating this in a more global way, or baking in the time to find a way to communicate this in app. But we moved a lot of things around on the left nav, and I kind of just naively thought that there's a learning curve. We have issues in epics that people can follow along, but obviously not everybody's like in our issues every day. So when things like labels moved to project information, we tested it. We knew that it was a better end result, but we didn't communicate that clearly, even internally. So I had like the PM for plan, like asking me where labels went. And I realized, you know, that could have been better communicated. I don't know if that's docs, because not everybody reads the docs. I don't know if that's in-app notifications, because we had so many changes that an in-app notification would have been cluttered and unclear anyway. It's possible that this was the only end result given the scope of what we were doing this time, but just something to consider for next time. Or open to feedback if you two have it.
Yeah, I think pinging the relevant PMs would have been like the right thing to do here. Kind of like what we did with that create new project kind of stuff, or create new group, where we brought in that group to say, hey, we want to change all these things about it. And then they were like, cool, we did some like testing on our side and we're happy to make these changes or whatever. So I think there was awareness from that side. The stuff with like moving members was like, I think a joint effort, as in like, cool, we're agreed. Yeah, I think we just missed linking up the labels one, because other than that, did you get anything else?
I saw that from a couple places. I think that's the biggest one, where it was like, maybe that's just the more commonly used one, and the feedback for members will come later when people try to change the members of their project. But I would have expected more in the reorganization of the operations menu too, from users, not necessarily internally, because that was collaborative and pretty well documented. This might be just bias from the feedback coming from the PMs and recency of that feedback, but it does seem like maybe there should have been a more easily accessible and concise list of like this menu item is changing to this location. And this, you know, in the past, what I've seen others do is like leave the item in two places and say like it's moving over here or in the docs comment. But there were so many things changing that doesn't scale. Anyway, again, there's nothing we can do about it right this second. We could probably write that concise summary in an epic and issue and point to it somewhere, just to make sure that like folks on support and whatnot can have a reference. But yeah.
Yep. Another idea is just to increase the feature flag group. So like FYI, people like, you're getting this feature flag and this is why you're getting it, or like this is why it might affect you. So with the feature flag, what I realized is like we've been talking about this a lot since February, like yourself and myself, and doing like UX showcases and like sharing stuff in Slack, but not everyone reads and absorbs the information this, you know, at the same speed as what we're thinking about things. And I think it's only when the pixels hit the screen that people like gave really constructive feedback that was useful. So it's probably, you know, that someone in that group of responsible for labels could have gotten the feature flag earlier and be like, hey, what's going on here? So maybe that's something that we should consider, like, yeah, feature flag for our group first, and then thinking about who should we expand out. So maybe the onus is more on us because we're making the changes there. But yeah. So.
Explicitly including the PMs and EMs in a feature flag rollout seems like a reasonably simple and measurable change that we could try next time.
I guess just for the record, I did include, I opened up the opportunity, and one of them at least was in our initial feature flag rollout, and just didn't come up as feedback until later. So yes, being more explicit and again, having a little more time to roll that out gradually internally would have been ideal.
The toast message idea, I've seen Evernote do that when they move cheese. And I don't know if a dismissible message like that would be helpful, but I saw them do it a few days ago.
Yeah, no, it is. That's something where I feel like the time crunch hit me and the team, where a little more time and a little more preparation, we could have done something like that in app. And yeah, I think initially our idea was to use a broadcast message on the top, but then we discovered through the process, like while I was out, Michael and Paul discovered that like that wasn't necessarily the proper use of the broadcast message, and there are other ways to handle that notification. With that learning, I think next time we could be a little more intentional about building in pop-ups or tooltips or toast messages in certain places or on certain views. So yeah, a little bit of lessons learned there, but yeah, luckily we're not actually removing any functionality, so it's a little bit of a learning curve. Hopefully people will get over it. If we find increased or continued confusion, then maybe our research was not comprehensive enough, and we could review. Yeah, we could revisit the decision, but I think right now it's something new, took people by surprise, and they'll figure it out. So on that note, we would like to move back to some of our other categories for a little while. Now that we've shipped all this navigation work. But I understand that there is some work there are some issues and bugs and refinements that we want to carry over. So I just want to talk through some of that. The barrier or the bar for getting these done in the next couple releases is pretty high in my mind. So it'd be like things that are really critical, or polish items that are just, you know, like very, very clearly unfinished. So I had some ideas. I created an issue based on the feedback, but we had talked about this before, but the feedback on how many clicks it's taking to get to projects or navigate the top menu. One of the ways we thought about addressing this was using a hover pattern to display the left or the right panel, the detail panel. I still don't know if that's the right answer, but I feel like there's a small iteration there that we could make potentially to reduce the number of clicks. The empty states of that panel, the detail view for each top level thing was another thing that I'm just not sure the value is there immediately, because we haven't received enough like input on what would go in those detail panes for all of the items. Like for us, snippets is pretty clear. I think, you know, activity is pretty clear, and maybe milestones is pretty obvious, but operations and security, not quite sure what would go in there. So maybe that's not work we need to pick up like in the next couple milestones. I don't know how you feel about that, Mike.
Yeah, like on the scale of like things to fix from there, like, yeah, we can debate about that. I shared our kind of idea with the growth team as like, this is potential screen real estate that you could use to do something here. Milestone snippets are kind of like you said, there's something to do there. The other pages are kind of interesting because they're essentially dashboards, and it's like, it's a dashboard, so it's really hard to say, yes, we're going to present something useful here. So we could wait, or yeah, maybe we just proceed with just the hover thing. Like, yeah, not too fussed either way. Yeah, let's weigh it out with how much work needs to be done. I think there's, out of that list, like the UI polish, like I would rather focus a bit more time on that, like the colors and that kind of stuff, and handling the feedback around the way our tooltips work, you know, versus like the pop-up menu. I feel like there's some quick wins that we could try out for a near release, where we just make a small adjustment to our tooltips so that you can't click on it, or like can't like move your mouse to it, like a normal tooltip. But yeah, so those are like, I recognize that we want to move onto some editor stuff. So yeah, let's discuss that asynchronously about what we feel is most important. But I think you and I seem to be on par with like where we want to take things.
Yeah. And I see the link to the epic you've got there. And I agree. I mean, the two of them I think are scheduled for 14.1. I'm not sure they have the deliverable milestone. So they're not necessarily assigned to anybody. I guess they're just coming out of design. So if we can get those planned for 14.1 or 14.2, that would be fantastic. And then potentially the hover pattern, exploring the hover pattern, or ways to reduce the clicks. I think the other possibility we see in the feedback is just like automatically focusing the search field, which I know we've gone back and forth and discussed in issues before. And that has implications on keyboard navigation and accessibility for screen readers.
Yeah. So that like keyboard focusing thing, that is like focusing on the search. We took that away like 3-4 months ago. So
Hmm.
it's like some people are realizing it now, but it's been like that for a while.
Yeah,
Yeah, it does make sense. So, but I think that can be handled like exclusively from this, just like
yeah,
how adding and removing that happen exclusively from the navigation work. So
for sure.
yeah.
Cool. I think we're definitely on the same page. The only other thing, I need to talk to Fran about the refactoring of the group sidebar, since that didn't get done. I don't want it to get too stale, but it has a fairly large time investment. It's probably a full milestone's worth of work, and I don't necessarily. I don't want it to linger, but I don't know
Mm-hmm.
when it's going to be best to tie him up for a whole milestone. Um, so that said, moving on to the content editor.
Mm-hmm.
The feedback has me feeling more confident about the block editing approach. So I just wanted to check in again now that you've had an opportunity to let that sit and simmer for a while. How confident are you with that overall direction, and when do you think that change should be made?
So when you say block editing, what exactly do you mean by that? In the sense that like, so when so there's that other issue that Himeshu raised with like selecting a bunch of various
Right.
content, um, whether you can select them individually one at a time or like collectively together. That I think this is what comes down to with block editing. I think if we force people to not be able to select everything at once, that's going to be painful. Um, versus if we can solve that, then it makes no difference really.
Mm-hmm. So
Um,
I think that the shorthand when I say block editing, what I mean is moving away from the toolbar into something that's more of that contextual block
mm,
element menu that's on each line. So if I hit return, I have a little menu near my
mm,
cursor that I can insert a header or line break or a table or something like that, and then move towards the formatting type options like bold and links and stuff into a tooltip that shows up when you select text. Um,
mm,
I think that pattern is what I mean when I say move towards block editing, because some of the feedback
mm,
is like, yeah, the editing window is real small and the toolbar would be better to be pinned on the top so that as you
mhm.
scroll, it doesn't move away and things like that, which is all true. But I hesitate to invest too much time into optimizing for the toolbar because we've pretty clearly determined that the block style contextual bubble menu thing is a familiar and pleasant editing experience. I don't think it's exclusive either. I think you, at least the implementation in TipTap, I believe you can select multiple block elements at once to delete them.
Cool. Um, so my 2 cents on this is, yeah, we moved to block editing and we keep the current editing area as is right now. It's like you haven't really, it's still painful.
Mm-hmm.
So the other piece that we kind of explored very briefly was like the page redesign, kind of like breaking the page, like relaying the page to use the space more. So that could happen at the same time as, well, for me, the toolbar is almost like a safe playground to start because what we're also doing at the same time is converting a functionality or like introducing functionality to the content editor. So that has to be like usable, whether it's in the toolbar or a floating thing. So to me, they can happen mutually exclusive of whether
Mm-hmm.
we go full um, bubble menu or not, or like block style editing experience. So that's to me fine. If we go full block editing, we just need to, yeah, I think it's worth experimenting within the wiki world, because that's a scoped world and that has a lot of users, and then we can use that to inform whether we should do it elsewhere. Um, no, no concerns with that. The framework that we're using is designed to do either, so it makes no, there's no real concerns. The only thing that we got from solution validation is like whatever you introduce in the block editing styles, make sure that it's that you can access everything. The only time it
Mm-hmm.
gets frustrating is when you can't access something that was in the toolbar that's no longer here. So in that solution validation, I was trying to be clever to say like, I'm only showing you formatting tips here versus adding new content. So the first MVCs potentially just including everything, but and that will give us feedback on their experience there, so we can experiment with different things like rolling out to 10%, or I don't know if that's even possible, but something to think about.
Yeah.
Or we,
Well, we
oh
can
well,
definitely start the.
we
Go
already
ahead.
have that journey, like try the new content editor, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's is an opt-in experience. So yeah, let's go with that, because it's being developed, so we have that messaging around it, so we can change at will. So yeah.
Yeah, I think in this initial period before it's the default editor for wiki markdown content, we have a little more freedom to tweak that experience. So if we're going to make that kind of change, now's the time to do it for sure.
Yep.
I will chat with Enrique and Himanshu about the effort there. It might be something that we need to pull in a third front end to tackle the view restructure at the same time so that it has more room to breathe. Yeah, we'll get it slated soon. I think images and tables are more important, so we're working on the right thing right now, but I think pretty soon we'll want to invest in that experience in general. Yeah, cool. As we get closer, and we can do this all async and issues and epics, but it could help them, and just because there's so much terminology, to have some clear guides for providing estimates and understanding like what structure we mean. It doesn't have to be comprehensive, but a couple of views, even maybe from your solution validation that already exist, surfacing those up and making sure that we're all talking about the same thing would be helpful.
Cool. Will do.
That's a lot of my stuff. I should have let you go first. Sorry. You go ahead.
Your stuff is my stuff. We're one team, so it's all good. So yeah, still from a to-do standpoint, like we talked about the commit flow, like holding a think big session from it. We don't have too many like existing issues been linked up, so yeah. And then this week a few people are off, so maybe we schedule that for some mid next week or Thursday next week or something like that. And the days are kind of, or do we just talk about it asynchronously? This is where like I'm kind of, what I kind of, the feedback that I need is like, what are we trying, like high level ideas so that we can start like thinking about the problem that we're trying to resolve with the existing commit flows, and then ideas on how we might improve that. Those, if I had to break it down to that, that's what we really need to do. We can we don't need the think big session if we get everyone just to insert their 2 cents about it within the group, um, and then we can use that to frame like the problem statements of why we're doing this, like why we changing the commit flow. Um, but right now, like one case for it is like consistency. Like every time you go to a new editing experience on GitLab, there's a learnability step. So this one's different. This one's different. This one's different. So there's a motivation from that standpoint. But is there something else? And that's the question I have, because you and I were kind of new to WebID versus like Dennis and other people within the team. So it's just trying to get an insight on what happened before us that like people have thought about. Uh,
Mhm.
so that's why I was hoping with the linking to old issues and stuff like that, so that we could get a sense of where people were coming from. But yeah, that was the goal, just think big. But I really think if we asked the right questions, we could do this async.
Yeah, that's a good point. And maybe the think big needs to be on the books so we have dedicated time. I'll schedule something and make you and I the only like required attendees, and we'll find some time that works for us. And then if anybody else can join and offer perspective, that would be beneficial.
Yep.
It'll probably be for next week anyway, just to give us time to prepare when more people are around, and then we can use that as we can record it, use it as an artifact to spur the conversation and get other people to contribute async. I'd like to think about it. I'd like to think about it more and get some ideas in an issue. I'm glad you set up this issue to gather, sort of previous research or previous issues on the topic. I think it's going to be a tricky one, because there are so many places where you can commit to a repository from the GitLab UI. It's hard to build one thing that serves everybody's needs, but if we can find some common ground and ideally optimize some kind of do some backend work to optimize the flow there too, that people can use to influence whether or not they use our shared component or not. Maybe it's irrelevant if, for example, the pipeline editor doesn't want to use a floating menu like we do on the wiki. If that's how we end up doing this, maybe that's not our top concern, but the fact that we've optimized the endpoints so that the inputs are clear, the expected and required inputs are clear, it's performant, and you get good statuses back, and that can inform executions even beyond what we end up doing on the front end. It's kind of
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, on my side, I have a lot of ideas. What I don't have is a real problem statement of like what the existing pain points are. I can think of different ways to like suss that out. As in like we can do some problem validation sessions to go through and get some feedback. But a lot of this stuff hasn't changed in a few years, so I'm sure there's existing documentation. Nadia like highlighted some points around the pipeline editor team, like with they kind of went with the MVC approach and just like emulated the same thing as the single file editor, and yet there's some stuff that they wish to improve upon that could be shared across other things. There's ideas that I have in my head around like progressive like enhancements between like the different contexts, like a wiki. Do you need to create a snippet from there, or like is it like something that you unlock like advanced options in that view, but by default in the web IDE it's like full on kind of like a scientific calculator and a normal calculator, and then
right.
iPhone where you just like rotate and like, oh, scientific mode. This, yeah. So there's tons of ideas. What I'm missing is like a problem statements to hook them to.
Yeah, I'm revisiting Nadia's comment in there, and I think that it's a really helpful summary of the challenges and highlights probably the pattern that we would need to address, which is that there's not really been a chance recently where somebody just took a step back and looked at the process of committing changes in GitLab. It's like the single file editor had this view, so we just copied it, and now it's in two places, but it still has the same drawback. So I think since single file editor, it's it's in the repository view, it's not technically a product, it's not a category, but like we can impact it. If we look at that as a use case separate from wiki and separate from web IDE, and find commonality between those three, where can we improve the experience across all three, and then where can it be enhanced or extended to be more useful in each context? I think that's a great start. So let's get that on the books. We can talk through all your ideas, get it all out in a brainstorm, and then start working on it.
Cool. Sounds good. Let's do that. Yeah, and the other thing, embedded snippets. I know that you wanted to aim to have this ready so that you can work with an intern PM due date. Like I haven't had time to look at it, so I need a forcing function here. Like if you say next Friday, I'm like, cool, done. Because what you were asking for is not something super detailed. It's just like a high level kind of rough thing. So yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think thinking through the cycle of how I'd like to work with that internship, I think a couple more high-level conversations before we dive into breaking down the MVC sounds perfectly acceptable. So like, let's say July 2nd.
Yeah. I'm just going to say July 1st because I'm away July 2nd anyway. So yeah.
No problem. Sounds good.
Cool. Awesome. Cool. And then my last point is something to like think about, ponder as we continue on here, is onboarding onboarding users for features within the content editor. So a flow, like let's say we go with the block editor, like how might we like inform users that these features are available? So one potential area here is just the UX team has this other initiative of doing a few analysis of like kind of setting the benchmark of how other products do certain patterns, like different jobs to be done. So we could do something similar for like editing platforms. But there's a lot in our current like comment editors, like the backslash for the quick actions. That's like once we get into that world, inserting content like images and things like that, what's possible, what's not possible, trying to marry the world of documentation meets product. I think so I shared a video in our group chat about like tutorials for complex games. It's really interesting video where I see a lot of the content editor stuff is like some of the stuff in Zelda where you learn to fish. You know, it's like do this action and then you'll get some fish. I think the content editor to me is almost like a mini game that teaches you like skills to like level up in the whole game. It's not like a whole campaign. It's not like, wow, you like conquered content editor. It's like here's another tool. Here's another feature of it, and yes, something to think about as we like build out the content editor, because going the block editor mode, the default view is almost like a blank page. So it's like, yeah, which is very different from other UI within GitLab that has like everything available on the screen. So something to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you're thinking about that. And I think the empty state of a new page in the content editor is something that we should definitely explore. And even I'm thinking like, I think I'm trying to open up Notion at the moment and I was logged out, but like even when you're on a new line, it reminds you that you can type / and get commands. And then there's a menu that describes each one. I think possibly Medium does the same thing to remind you about / commands. I think we can take a lot of inspiration there to guide people through and maybe even like be clever about when we get to issue descriptions and epic descriptions, like maybe after you type some content, we change that tip to like say add some labels or something like that. Or we need to be careful because not everybody uses labels and milestones the same way, but finding ways to like promote discovery of these advanced functions that's a huge opportunity. So I like that you're thinking about it already. Yeah, let's keep that in mind, and maybe that's part of the early bits of that as part of our switch to a block editor. Even if it's not / commands at first, because I don't know if that's probably not gonna come for free. That might take a little longer on the iteration timeline. But say you create a new line and there's like a little bubble menu on the left in the gutter, like maybe that placeholder text explains like what you're looking at, and I think that could go a long way. Confluence does some stuff about like empty page templates when you create a new one. And I'm pretty sure Notion does it too. When you first create an account in a project, there's like maybe pages that are pre-filled out. I don't know if the wiki is that appropriate for it, but we could do that for like issue templates. Potentially. We could look to work with the plan team to make those a little more interactive.
Because if you do that, if you get it into an issue, then you can get it into onboarding. So when the users creates a new GitLab account, they're taken to like a board, like a GitLab board with a bunch of like to-dos and all this stuff. Part of that one could be, edit your first or like fix your first issue, and then in that it's just a bunch of actions, and then you just like highlight, do this, and then you click done. And then that's like a step in the onboarding process of like how to write in GitLab. So I think that requires some work with getting our content editor up to par, so that you can do everything the issue thing can. But yeah, barring that, I think that's a good goal to reach to. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, let's
Cool.
let's keep that in mind. I think moving to a block editor kind of flow is a great time to introduce some of that education, and then when we get to issues, that onboarding board, I know I have an issue out there somewhere to explore, like how we can bring the web ID in there, and we can create another issue for how we can reinforce like editing in the content editor as well. Yeah.
The other way to do onboarding is just like when users use the action. So, using the wiki world, if you entered like bold with the toolbar, it suggests like, oh, you can do this by keyboard as well. And therefore, we actually decouple ourselves from the main onboarding, and then we're kind of like the forever onboarding flow. So whatever you deal with, whenever you use bold inside a content editor, we just pop that thing, and then cool, that step is done. Yeah, many things to do, something to think about while we're going through this world. But yeah, just wanted to put that, incept that idea in your head now before we jump deeper into content editing.
Yeah, I like it. Thanks for bringing it up.
Great.
Well, we're well over, but yeah, we haven't had this in a couple of weeks, so it's great that we could sync up. I'll let you get some sleep. I know it's late for you, and thanks again for covering for me and for managing everything while I was out.
No problem. Good to have you back.
Yeah. All right. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. See ya. Bye.
See you. Bye.